You walk down a school hallway. It's 7 a.m. You enter a classroom. You see the rows of empty chairs, the motivational posters. You see the dust on the floor that the janitor hasn't quite picked up yet. For all intents and purposes, it is a classroom, isn't it? The answer is no. It's not a classroom until class begins. It's not a class until the students file in, sit in their chairs with their futures right ahead of them. And they're all looking up front at you, the teacher. You stand there with only a teacher's guide on the desk. But you look up at the students' faces and you know that won't be enough. No, that certainly won't be enough with Alice, who's pregnant with a child. Certainly not with Aaron, who has ADD. Even Christina, although bright, shows anger and frustration at you for even being there. No, it's not enough for her either. What is enough? What should a teacher do for the Alices, Aarons, and Christinas in the world? Why even be a teacher to begin with? The answer? Because there are those Alices, Aarons, and Christinas in the world, and they need somebody. They need you. This video will address the joys and challenges of being a teacher, and if being a teacher is right for you. Movies provide all sorts of models for being a good teacher, and this is where the myth of a perfect teacher comes from. While these are certainly unrealistic caricatures of what teaching actually is, all these provide an example. In Bobby Fischer, we see that we must challenge and give our student goals, whether it be chess or anything else in life. In Dead Poets Society, we see that we need to challenge our students and always allow them a different perspective for our world. But how exactly do we do this?
A little pole.
Why do I stand up here? Anybody?
To feel taller.
No. Thank you for playing, Mr. Dalton.
In Freire's The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, we learn that there is a kind of teaching that's cold, mechanistic, and procedural. The teachers are to be the subjects, the wise sages who instill information at their students. The students, on the other hand, are mere objects, receptacles for any sort of knowledge that their teacher throws at them. If this is your idea of teaching, don't teach. The classroom, the real classroom, is a complex dynamic of culture, information, and role interplay. Your job as a teacher is not to instruct, but to help the students instruct themselves. You learn from them, they learn from you. You raise questions, you bring up controversial issues, you ask them things that are relevant to their lives and the material. They, in turn, will ask questions of you. This information isn't linear, it's circular.
In short, the classroom should be an experience, not a task. You can accomplish this by using subjects that are culturally relevant for the students, such as music they identify with, shows they identify with, song lyrics they identify with. You can ask them, what interests you about these things? What are the themes contained therein? How, for instance, might this be relevant to a book such as Lord of the Flies or Ellison's The Invisible Man? Tell them to write the answers to these questions in a journal, or just the questions themselves, so that you can help them map their psychic journey through the class as it progresses across the year. They will have traced their own mind, and that journal will always be there for them in the future. By asking these questions, your class becomes less two-dimensional, less assimilationist, and more relevant to their lives. It is important when doing this that you understand that your classroom will be diverse. Your students will come from many different backgrounds. It is your job as a teacher to accept students' experiences and how they creatively implement it in their work, regardless of gender, ethnicity, class, sexual preference, their favorite color, or what their favorite kind of soda is. Your job as a teacher is to show the students that they are all valued and important, and to give them a safe place to inquire.
It is also your job as a teacher to get a little bit philosophical with your students at times. Does this mean quoting Socrates or Kant? Absolutely not. What it does mean is to challenge your students to look at their world in a different way. What are the rules of the world? What is their place in it? What things are truly important? What things aren't? These things are for your students to decide, but it is up to you to bring them up. This will allow each student to understand the higher social framework that they exist in, so that they can question it and challenge it and take part in it. This makes them socially aware, socially conscious individuals who can take their education and actually apply it to life. Another important job as a teacher is to make sure that you're managing your class effectively. And this means that sometimes you'll have to deal with retaliation. And when you do find a student that retaliates, don't simply send him or her off to the office. That's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that is bleeding profusely. It is your job to find out why that student is retaliating. Perhaps they have problems at home. Perhaps there's a learning disability. Perhaps they're brilliant yet unmotivated. So you have to make sure that you find ways to, in some ways, accommodate that student and maybe even give them projects that will make them interested in the subject material, just as long as it conforms to the guidelines for mutual respect that you provide in your syllabus. Being a teacher isn't just interacting with students, it's also being incredibly organized. For instance, each night you will have tons of homework to correct. Also, in addition to that, you'll have to make a lesson plan day by day that will fit the curriculum. But be sure that this is not set in stone. The plan should also be made flexible for the students' needs. Finally, you must care about your students. You must be a good model for the outside world and be culturally sensitive. You must stand up for what you believe is right as a teacher. For instance, if you are having a problem with standardized tests and you think that the expectations are too low or unrealistic for your students, stand up, organize a protest, with, of course, consulting with other colleagues first. This can be done through such tools as Facebook. Facebook has been used recently in one political revolution, as seen here.
Muzzle the opposition and obstruct the mobilization of Iranian youth through Facebook. The reformist presidential candidates are using new media technology to reach out to their young voters to unseat the current incumbent. These include reformist candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi, a former prime minister considered a threat to current hardline president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
Now, obviously, we're not trying to fight a fanatical theocracy here, but it is a good point that Facebook can be used as a good social organizing tool to get people moving. After all, Facebook did start as a networking tool for schools. All you'd have to do is contact people from different high schools, and if you wanted to start a real protest about standardized tests or some other issue in a peaceful, respectful manner, then you could do it. It's all at the tip of your fingers. Well, we've covered a lot in this video. We've covered the fact that in some ways, there is no such thing as the arbitrary roles of teacher and student. We are all learners in some way, shape, or form. This should be reflected in our classrooms as we challenge our students, manage the class effectively, take personal interest in our students, and provide them with a voice that is relevant to them. If you can do all these things, and if you have a passion for doing them, then you have what it takes to be a teacher.